Today's conversation is a conversation that really burns my heart. But it's a conversation that must be had because there are things that are happening in our communities, not just happening once or twice, but recurring, and they're everyday occurrences. We're talking about when you have people that are known to you, people that you sit with at the table, people that you share life with, becoming predators to the girl child. That is the topic for today, the predator in your home. What do you do then? If your brother turns around and abuses your daughter, where do you go to? Who do you report to? How do you make the choice between your own child and your brother? What happens to everybody else in the family? Who do they choose? Do they choose you? Do they choose your daughter? Or do they choose your brother? That is the crux of the matter for today on Issues Pane Nyaya. Dinonzi Rejoice Nharaunda-Makawa. Before I introduce the panel for today, let's just listen to the cases in hand.
Ndakabatwa nasekuru tatiri kumusha hanzvadzi dzangu dzadzisipo saka sekuru anagogo vangu vaenda kuchechi tasara inini hanzvadzi dzangu nasekuru sekuru vangu vakusanamata sekuru aibva vandishedza mumba mavo nasingazivi kuti ndozvava kundishedza ndobva ndaenda mumba kwavo hanzvadzi dzangu dzaitamba ndobva ndaenda ndobva vakiya dhoo mumba mavo nemukati ndobva vatora makiyi avo iyo varamba vakamabata ndopa vakandibata inini ndakafonerwa nehanzvadzi yangu iye wekubata mwana ndiye akandifonera akanditi tete uyai kuno titori kwasabhuku izvozvi kunzi mwana ane nhumbu ndikati nhumbu ndeyani svikanzi handisi kuziva ndikati ahora chindiri kuuya ikoko murume wangu wandogara naye baba vake mwana uti akarambana baba vake vechitu saka vandogara ndobva vanditsvagira mari yebhasi bva vakweretawo mari kwakakwereta mari svika ndichienda kumusha unoti mwana chii ndobva ndaenda kumusha ndobva ndasvika kumusha zveshuwa ndakasvika kumusha ndakasvika nasekuru vangu hanzvadzi yamai vangu ndobva tabvunza vanopamba vangoramba vachitsika nyaya vakati haana nhumbu haana chii ndakabva kuno ndatenga pregnant test yangu ndobva ndanotesta mwana umbva ndauti mwana zveshuwa ane nhumbu bva ndangomusiya nhambomurova nhambomtsvuka hanzvadzi yangu ndobva nditi tete madi kutakura mwana manomubvisisa mwana nhumbu kuharare ndikati nyaya yakumapurisa hazvigoneke kuti nditakwire mwana ndiende naye kuharare ndomubvisisa nhumbu ini ndindozosungwa kana nyaya yakumapurisa hazvichagoneki zvikanzi aiwa toenda zvesecret ndikati aiwa handizvigoni imi kana ndizvikwanisa kukwira ibhazi moende nemwana kuharare munobvisisa nhumbu inini ndobva ndavanyepa ndikati mangwana ndokwira bhazi ndichienda naye kuharare ndobva watonti handikupai mari yebhazi ndobva ndatogara paya vanoti mwana wangu wacha hembe dzako ndobva wacha hembe kuma3 dzekumanheru vechild line wekukotwa ndopa vakauya kumba ndobva vayabva vachitora ndobva vati handei kumapurisa ndobva taenda kumapurisa nemwana wangu tasvika kukotwa ndobva vati tirare kumapurisa tokuonai vangwana makuseni kuseni kuchiedza vechild line ndobva vayabva vachitora hanzvadzi yangu akabvanza atevere nemukadzi wacho pakotwa ndobva ndasvika ndobva asvikapo ndobva akandira muzukuru mabhisiketsi kuti nyarara usanotaure nyaya yako ini nyaya ndandainzwa kudhara zvangu kuchechi kwanga ndaenda ndiri kuno kuharare ndobva amuti mabhisiketsi usanotaura kana waenda ndobva vasvika vachodlai ndobva vanotora mwana bva vanobvunza muofisi mavo bva vamudza kuti mwana ndobva ataura kuti iye hanzvadzi yamama yakandibata ndobva tadzoka kumapurisa ndobva tagara kumapurisa kusvika mapurisa vazomusunga pavamusunga ndobva ndaiswa kubhodha kunyamapanda pakaiswa kubhodha kunyamapanda mangwana acho bvanzi akuenda kwamutoko kurimandi rimandi handakuona kuti akapinda murimandi here kana kuti haana handa zvandiri kutomboziva kuti akapinda but mbusi yangoti akapinda murimandi ndobva ndati nhumbu ine mwedzi mushoma isati atambopinda mu3 months vemutemo wangu achi nhumbu ngaibviswe sezvo nhumbu ichiri diki mbusi andobva changu achi aiwa chachanga chabvunza mwana kuti mwana uda nhumbu yako here ndikati mwana haana decision yaanotaura kuti mwana uri kuda nhumbu here ini ndini mai vake ndindogara ndindovachengeta vana ndindoziva kuti vadyei vararama nei saka iwo ndo haungandibvunze kuti wewe mwana totanga tabvunza mwana haana chaanogona kutaura angona kuti ndikuida kana kuti handisi kuida semwana mudiki mbusi andopakanditi madi kutaurirana nehama yenyu yabata mwana uyu ndikati asi unobva waita mwana here muupenyu hwako asi unenge ngomwa seko unobva wabata mwana muupenyu hwako mukadzi mupurisa aita nyaya iyi ndobva ndachongataura kuti hanzi nditaurane nehama yangu panyaya yakadai so ngaasungwe zvake chero ndisina hama inini ngaasungwe munhu aende kujeri
saka kuti akaendeswa kujeri here kana kuti haana hapa zvandiri kutomboziva. Kusvika ndazomubvunza mupurisa yanga asingandipindure, kusvika pandakazonomhangara mutauni nyaya yangu kumapurisa, ndopakafonwa nemapurisa vapuwa bepa recomplain andakana nokomplaina inini kuti nyaya yangu handisiona ndikufambiswa sei. Pandazomubvunza anga kundichidzokerai kumbonomhangara mutauni mamakambomhangara nyaya yenyu, ini musandinetse makandisisa basa. Ndobva ndati alright. Sekuru wangu andodze mumambo ati mapurisa ese vakuita nyaya iyi tinovaziva. Hamadzana mama wangu aita kuti mapurisa epamutoko pipi aripo tinomuziva, tinonotaura naye obudisisa munhu. Saka pavakaenda kwamutoko hamadzana mama wangu, shuwa vakanotengesa mombe dzavo tubva vatuma sekuru wangu hanzvadzi yamai vangu, wandoti ndo amai vangu vakuru, ndobva vatumwa ivo ndobva vanzende pamutoko. Pari zvino musungu akabuda hasi mukati memapurisa, handiziva kuti nyaya chakafambiswa sei.
As she went off to start a new life with a new husband after she'd divorced from her first husband, Chipo's mother left her children in the care of her mum in the village. Whilst in the care of her mother in the village, her brother raped her daughter. Her daughter at the time was 13 years old. That's the voice that we heard as Chipo's mother recounts and retells what happened, how she arrived and found that indeed her daughter was pregnant, how her brother had a conversation with her around convincing her to abort, how Chipo's mum refused to take her daughter through the abortion, and how Childline got involved, tried to take the case to court, tried to take the case to the police. The case was reported, but up until today, and Chipo, who was 13 at the time, is now 14, and is mum to a little girl who she doesn't quite know how to relate to, because this is her mother's niece, this is her aunt, because according to culture and tradition, it's her uncle's child, but it's also her daughter. And that's the conversation that we're trying to get into. When the predator is in your home, how do you unpack it? We have another case. Let's take a listen.
Chakaitika ndechekuti vatezvara nemwana wavo vakaronga kuti handi tinovhura shopu, iwe muroora ndichasanotungamira newe. Mwana wakanditi ndichanohodha fishi dzekunotengesa mushopu. Taenda kushopu kuya, tagara 3 days. Ndafonera murume kuti kochiuya, akati haiko kwandiuyi. Ndibva ndaudza vatezvara vakati, kuti baba mwana nyara ati handisi kuuya. Baba ndibva vati mwana, ndibva vamufonera kumwana. Vatezvara ndopakandibata chibharo ndakushopa achiti murume wakaramba kuuya, mari dzangu dzamadya dzawandisa.
Saka vakanga vari kuti kukubata chibharo kuti ubhadhare mari dzavo dzawanga iwewe nemurume wako. Manga magara makore mangani makaroorana?
Nemurume wangu tatine 2 years.
Mami nemwana here mumwe?
Ane 2 years.
Ane 2 years. Saka wakatobereka mwana mumusha imomo? Wakabatwa chibharo kangani navatezvara? Kaviri. Saka pawakabatwa chibharo wakanomhangara here?
Handina, wakandichikidzira wakati ukangozvireva ndokuuraya. Ine hama dzangu dziri muno dzakawandisa. Ino ipapo hapana kwandaiziva. Ndibva ndati zvina nenditize ndiende kubasa, vasaramba vachindibata chibharo.
Saka wakazotiza? Uchiindepi?
Ndichienda kuBedbridge.
Alright. Ndobva zvadii wasvika kuBedbridge?
NdakuBedbridge ndibva ndana madhezi angu egweza adarika, ndopandakaona ndabata pamuviri. Ndakusakwanisa kushanda, ndobva ndakadzoka kumba kuna mama.
In the just ended audio, we hear a woman retelling again the story of how she was lured by her father-in-law and taken to a distant place from where they lived with her husband and the family. The pretext allegedly, was that they were going to open a new business. They got there, opened a new business, father-in-law with daughter-in-law in tow. A few days after settling in, she alleges that he raped her more than once. He raped her twice. She then goes on to say, after realizing that the rape would not stop, she decided to escape. She left, but on arrival to where she'd escaped to, she realized that she'd fallen pregnant. She tried to tell her husband. Her husband wouldn't hear of it. She says she tried to tell her mother-in-law, and her mother-in-law allegedly accused her of her husband snatching. Left with nowhere else to go, the girl tells of how she went back home to her mum. As of today, she's now given birth to a little girl who is her husband's husband's sister, and who is her father-in-law's daughter. What does it mean when you are impregnated by your father-in-law? That's the conversation we're having today. And to help us unpack, we have from the victim-friendly unit, Superintendent Mutema, who is no stranger. Welcome back.
Thank you very much, Rejoice.
We also have Fadzai Shakwino, who is coming from Wilsa. She's the director of Wilsa, to help us unpack this conversation. Welcome, Fadzi.
Thank you so much, Rejoice.
We are taking a break. We'll be right back. As Issues Pane Nyaya, our mandate is to unearth cases such as the two we just heard about, because usually such cases fall through the cracks and you never ever hear them again. They're sacred cows. They're not meant to be discussed. They're not discussable because of the nature that they inhabit. But again today, as Issues Pane Nyaya, we are daring to challenge the status quo. Fadzi, we heard those two cases. Would you like, before we get into detail, to just tell us about Wilsa and what it is that you do?
Well, thank you so much. So Wilsa is actually celebrating 30 years of being established this year. It's our 30th anniversary. It was established in 1989 as a women's rights think tank, where we actually work on evidence policy research. We also provide free legal assistance to women and girls. At the present moment, we are in about 16 districts of the country, working in partnership with the Judicial Services Commission, and we operate what are called help desks at the civil courts or the local courts in those districts. We also do a lot of policy level advocacy, where we try and investigate or interrogate the law, problematize where it is actually discriminating against women and girls, or where women's and girls' rights are actually not administered in a manner that advances their constitutional rights. And we try and bring these issues to the forefront using an approach that brings the lived realities of women right to policymakers, and then we engage around law and policy. One of the most important ones that we've been currently working on is around child marriages, and also we are trying to look at issues related to sexual offenses as well. Is the law adequate? Issues related to the age of consent that are highly problematic in the prosecution of sexual offenses. How can they be dealt with? So these are some of the issues that Wilsa in a nutshell deals with.
You know, each time I hear the term child marriage, I cringe, because there is no marriage. It's just pedophilia. And I don't know if we romanticize it by calling it child marriage, by calling it a marriage at all. But we're talking about the predator in your home today. Do you want to just explain to us what rape is, Fadzi?
Okay, rape actually is a very serious or heinous crime. And the law, which is the Criminal Law Codification and Reform Act, actually defines rape as a violation where a male forces a woman or a girl into non-consensual sex. So the issue around the consent of the sex comes to play, but the law also goes further to define even where consent may actually be sought, the different ages where a woman is actually presumed by law not to be able to be to give consent. So the law actually says any girl who is below the ages of 12 years is not able to consent to any sexual activity at all. But within our settings is a feminist organization, we actually set the bar higher because the Constitution actually defines a child to be the age of 18 years.
Precisely,
So
yeah.
even though the law is still yet to be aligned in a number of areas, we actually just say it is much safer to just say any girl who is below the age of 18 years cannot consent to any sexual activity at all.
Because when we go by that age of consent, could we then technically be saying that Chipo at 13 could have consented to sex with her uncle?
Technically, yes, but you find that even within the same Criminal Codification Act, they go also to define the non-consensual age to be between 12 and up to 14. But we are also saying that we have to look at the circumstances in which this consent is sought.
You know, I'm thinking it's a whole conversation that we need to have around the age of consent, because sex is so complicated. At 50, at 60, people are still grappling with the realities of what sex means. So I can't even begin to think how a 13-year-old can conceptualize and consent and then go through. But back to today, do you want to maybe just share with us the prevalence of rape in Zimbabwe?
Yes, rape is actually quite high. When you look at, I think, the Spotlight Initiative, which is a big program funded by the UN Family and other partners, did a comprehensive research just around gender-based violence, which also included rape. You find that they did come up with a high incidence of sexual offenses in the country, especially intimate partner rape is quite prevalent. It's coming up to almost 33 to 35% depending with the geographic location. So in some provinces in the country, it is actually higher than in other areas, mainly because of issues to do with culture, with religion, where it has actually become a norm that is acceptable.
Yes, a lot of times you find that rape is dressed up and made not to look like rape. Meanwhile, it is just rape. Do you want to explain incest to us?
So incest is also quite complicated, but it is defined as a sexual offense in terms of the law, where we are actually saying people within a prohibited relationship end up having sexual activity. So even if they have consented and they are both willing parties to the offense, but because of the prohibition of your relationship to each other, it becomes incest and it is a crime. So if you're in what the law sometimes calls the first degree of prohibited relationship, for instance, a father and a daughter, there is direct relationship there by biological relationship or by blood. So those people cannot engage in any sexual activity. Mother and son, these are also people that cannot engage in any sexual activity. A biological brother and a biological sister, these are also in a first degree kind of relationship that cannot. Then there are also second degree and a third degree, like cousins, nieces and uncles. So the law goes further to try and develop this further and unpack it further to say which are the prohibited degrees of relationships that people cannot be found to be having any sexual activity.
I'm just thinking as you're talking about the father-in-law, daughter-in-law scenario, there's no blood relation there. Again, another conversation that we should that we should unpack. Superintendent Mutema, victim-friendly unit. Just a very brief background.
Oh, thank you very much, Rejoice. The victim-friendly unit is section within the Zimbabwe Republic Police that is dedicated to responding to crimes against women and children. We established the victim-friendly unit around 1995 after a study that had been done by the government to see and analyze the manner in which women and girls were being handled at police stations. And this then culminated into the victim-friendly unit in the police force. But you also find the victim-friendly component in other government departments as well. If you look at the courts, we've got the victim-friendly courts, we've got victim-friendly clinics, we've got even child-friendly schools.
Yes.
The idea is to make sure that the environment is safe for women and children. So as the victim-friendly unit in the Zimbabwe Republic Police, our responsibility is to police crimes against women and children. In other words, we offer proactive and we offer reactive services. Proactive, we are proactive in the sense that we go to the communities before the offenses have been committed to try and raise awareness about this issue. If we don't talk about these issues like we are doing, people will not come and report.
Yes.
So it is important for us to continuously talk about these things, engage communities, engage other stakeholders so that people feel free to approach either the police or other stakeholders and make reports.
Whilst you are there, can you talk about the number of reported cases of rape, particularly rape cases over the last 12 months?
Unfortunately for me, policy does not allow me to highlight, statistics. But I can confirm that there is a high prevalence, even from surveys that Fadzai was referring to. They confirm that. So apart from the proactive, we also do the reactive, where an offense has been committed. We then move in and try and help and assist the survivors through offering services like prosecution of the offenders. But that is not the only need that the survivor would want. Legal need is only one component. We also look at the various needs of the survivors. What is that they want? Then we refer. For example, we have got stakeholders from WILSA. If there is need for other services that we know WILSA can help, for example, a person might require maybe
legal counsel.
Yes.
Okay.
Then we then refer to them. So our officers really are at the center of all the processes. And remember, most people, they access the police much easier than other stakeholders because of our geographical presence and location.
I like what you say, because you say that they are within and they're nearer. Police officers are nearest probably to report cases. But in those two cases, we're hearing the one case, the mother talking about having reported the case, but it seemed like there was the case was literally falling through the cracks. She talked about possibility of corruption. Do you want to talk about why sometimes cases are not handled the way that they should be within the Zimbabwe Republic Police?
Listening to what the survivor was saying and the family, for me, what I can see there is lack of communication between the various stakeholders. Remember, there were other organizations that were also involved. It's not only the police. They talked about other CSOs. They talked about National Prosecuting Authority, the offender, going to court and eventually being released and things like that. So it's very difficult to say what really happened unless we have the details of the survivor and go and look into the case. But having said that, I can see there is an issue of communication there. And there is also an issue of appreciation of certain aspects of the law that our communities are not privy to. And that is the reason why we do the proactive that I mentioned earlier on, so that we explain to the communities what the law says in respect of certain aspects. Remember, she was talking about, for example, issues to do with the termination of pregnancy.
Yes.
Where the officers were trying to explain to her that we need to have the word of the person who is carrying the pregnancy. That is key.
Can a 13-year-old Fadzi, can they make that decision about whether or not they want to keep a pregnancy?
Well, it's a very complex scenario, like Superintendent is explaining, in the sense that the law also requires the victim herself to also be heard.
Yeah.
Because more and more we are also talking about child participation. Yes, indeed, she's a child, but at a certain level we also need to also seek a consent. It's more or less like saying a mentally ill person.
Yeah.
If they were in the same scenario, would we just terminate the pregnancy without
consulting them? So we judge capacity.
There have to be a judgment of capacity, but I think, like he rightfully put it, even in the case where we have recognized this is a child and they may not be capable, the mother as the guardian should have then made a court application as the guardian of the minor, because remember, children are under the guardianship of their parents. So in this case, her only recourse, even if the child had refused, was to make a court application as the guardian.
And then the
court,
upper guardian would then
yes,
make...
the court, usually the High Court is the upper guardian of minors. The High Court as the upper guardian of minors, or the Children's Court in this case, would then have made that determination.
Now here we have two cases supposedly of rape. We have rape of a 20-year-old woman, and we have the rape of a 13-year-old girl. Are they both considered and weighed the same when they are being prosecuted?
The issue of rape, I think, is quite similar. What then really changes in terms of the sentencing, definitely they'll also look at the age. They also look at other aggravating circumstances, the nature of the relationship. They also look at if the person was in a position of authority and could have coerced this person or threatened them. How did this occur? Because these are now other aggravating circumstances that if sentencing had been done, or if the accused person would have been sentenced, it would add more years in terms of the sentences.
Is there a standard sentence for rape?
Yes, definitely. The law prescribes a minimum sentence, and I know that the law was also recently amended that for rape sentencing, you can actually get a penalty up to life sentence. So there is a minimum standard in terms of a pattern of sentencing that is expected for the law, for the courts that then adjudicate over these issues.
It's really quite heartwarming to hear that there's actually a law and that there's been reviews concerning that, because as the women's constituency, we were constantly annoyed that for livestock, for example, there are very set and clear pathways, and there's no conversation, there's no discussion around the same conversations that happen when a rape happens. What was she wearing? Where was she? What is the nature of the relationship? You've stolen a cow. You've stolen a cow. This is it. But you've raped, and there tends to be conversation. Fadzi, do you want to just speak to that?
Well, the law is the law. You know that within the Constitution, even accused persons have rights. So whilst they might have violated someone else's rights, we cannot also then violate their rights. They have a right to ensure that if they are being accused, remember we always say that every person is innocent until proven guilty. So this matter has to go before the courts. And unfortunately, when we go through the courts, there is a process, a system, and a procedure where each person has a right to be heard. The accused person has a right to be heard, their story, just as in the same manner the survivor has a right to be heard. Then the law officer, who is the magistrate or the judicial officer, there has to also make a determination based on that. But within the mix of things is also the issues related to evidence. What evidence is the prosecutor bringing before the court that this crime actually happened?
Yeah.
And is the witness themselves? This is now the key element, which I also want to also raise, especially to females that are survivors of offenses, that the witness is also the key witness of the court. So sometimes one of the challenges that we face is that the witness becomes a hostile witness. As in this case, we heard that kwakambopuwa biscuits,
Yes.
biscuits were offered, things like that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
sometimes things happen behind the scenes that the law may not be able to control.
Yeah.
And you find that the
sometimes,
witness
yeah.
becomes hostile, and yet the prosecutor's main witness to ensure that this person gets penalized is this key witness. So if they become hostile, sometimes it becomes complicated, and this is where sometimes the sentence becomes lower from a rape to something else, and then the community raises a hue and cry to say, where were the police?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because sometimes then it looks like the police are missing. It looks like the police are not doing their job. It looks like because of the stuff. And sometimes you have witnesses that then withdraw midway during the case. Yeah. We will take a break and be back shortly. Welcome back to the final segment of Issues Pane Nyaya, where we are talking about rape and possibly incest. Now, before the break, we were talking about how sometimes what Fadzi referred to as hostile witnesses, and she was speaking mainly to survivors out there, how key it is that you cooperate with the law if you want the best outcomes and the best level of justice to be meted out against any crime that you may be surviving. But Fadzi, we've found that a lot of times cases do fade away, and that sometimes justice is seemingly denied. Do you want to just talk about that? Because I know that Wilsa has been working on justice denied.
Yes, so we really have been following up where there are cases of concern and people seem to be unhappy with the process and the procedure, but a lot of that sometimes is to do with communication. So just giving an example of the cases that we've had, sometimes the perpetrator is out on bail. This is a process that people also need to understand, that even within the rights of the accused person, they may actually apply for bail, which means that they have not been sentenced. We are still going on with the matter, but whilst the procedures are happening for a full trial to be had, if there are no other circumstances, they may actually apply for bail so that they're actually out of prison or for remand whilst they are awaiting for full trial.
When that happens, the Superintendent Mutema, and a perpetrator goes back into the community, do we have provisions to then support the victim? Because what they are now seeing is their perpetrator, their abuser, back. If it was in a home setting, for example, we're talking about the perpetrator in your home. So if they are going back into the same household, what support systems exist there?
Okay, thank you very much, Rejoice, for raising that issue. Issue of bail is very contentious. When we are on the survivor's side, we don't want the person to be given bail. But if it's our relative that has been arrested, we want bail. So it's a very complicated. But coming to your question, the process of bail can be done at almost 2 stages. The first stage is at the court of first appearance, at the magistrate court, on the initial appearance or even later. But let us talk about the initial appearance. Usually on the initial appearance, the police officer who has arrested the person or who is investigating the case usually is present on the first appearance because they are taking the person to court. So in that incident, in that case, it's easier for the officer to have knowledge of what would have transpired at court because he's there. So if the person is given bail, there are also conditions that are given. The court usually imposes certain conditions that the perpetrator has to observe. So our officers now will have that information and they will pass on the information to the family so that the family will know that this person is supposed to do A, B, C, D and is not supposed to do this. But the second level where bail is admitted is the most problematic one, is where a person is remanded in custody today. Then the person applies for bail from the High Court.
Yeah.
Now, under those circumstances, our officers, they are not even aware that there is this process that is going on.
Or that the person has now been given bail.
And if the person is given bail, yes, Rejoice. If the person is given the bail, they can actually be surprised to meet him in a bus going home or wandering in the community, or the family is complaining that this person is already back. And usually this is where people then start throwing theories. Oh,
he's been released, there's been corruption,
there has been corruption and so on. But it's only because we don't have information. Our survivors and their families do not have information.
Whose responsibility, though, is it for that information to be passed and for survivors and their families to know what's going on? Fadzi, whose responsibility is it?
So I think you find that the multi-sectoral protocol on care and management of sexual violence, which is administered through the Judicial Service Commission, I think they're the custodian of that framework, actually says that all stakeholders involved have a duty and a care of responsibility to ensure a survivor-centered approach. So when it comes to communication, it should be a dual role. The first role in this case, where the matter is now before the courts, we now have the prosecutor involved, like he said. So it is also the duty of the prosecutor to also inform the other stakeholders in the system on what has happened and where the case is going. This is where you find the frustration now of survivors, sometimes going even to civil society organizations who say, I don't have a lawyer, I need a lawyer. And we're saying, no, you don't need a lawyer. The prosecutor there on that end now has taken over your matter. That's the state lawyer who's representing you. And they should be the ones in constant touch with you and also with the police and other stakeholders. But sometimes there's that misalignment. Yes.
Now, these two cases that we heard of the 13-year-old and of the woman from Rutenga who was allegedly raped by her father-in-law, what would you recommend they do now if they're feeling that they've not accessed justice as Wilsa? What is your recommendation?
Well, this is a really complicated scenario, and unfortunately, there are already children seared out of these relationships. My advice and my recommendation would be for them, if they really feel that these matters were not handled properly, in terms of the law or the procedures, most of these cases go on mandatory review. So they can actually pursue this case before the courts and look at how they were reviewed and what prospects are there to have these cases looked into, so that if they are unhappy with the prosecution, maybe at the higher courts something can actually be done around these cases. Then obviously the issues related to the children now come into being because they are already there, and unfortunately because of the nature of the relationship, termination was not done in time. There are children there. So we now have to also get the intervention of the social welfare department, which is why the multi-sectoral protocol brings them into being as one of the important stakeholders. There's need for family counseling here to be done, so that we are also not going to abuse this child that has been seared out of this relationship. And in cases where in some instances, we've handled a case where someone actually just said, I cannot take care of this child because of the nature in which I was abused and gave birth to this child. You can hand them over even to social services. There's a procedure that can be taken through for these children to be taken over.
Technically given up.
Yes, given up to the state through the Ministry of Social Welfare. Oh, wow. So they can go to a children's home. And we also have people that adopt these children. Okay. So we've also supported people that are saying, I'm also looking to adopt a child. And these are some of the children that end up being given into homes and other families and people who can also love them and take care of them.
Yeah, it is complicated. Pane Nyaya, sure. But from a police perspective, if a case like these two that we're talking about, if somebody out there feels that they want to resuscitate it, who can resuscitate it? Does it have to be the victim? Can it be a family representative? How does it work?
Thank you very much, Rejoice. I'm sure from the first case, you have heard that the survivor is actually saying, the police officer is saying, wakandiburitsisa basa.
Yes,
You get
I
the point?
left my job because
I
of...
left my job because
Yes.
of. This is how serious, as an organization, we take, you know, issues of malpractice. Remember, in the other episode, we talked about, you know, the processes that happen if a police officer hasn't done his job well.
Yes.
So this is one of the testimonies that we are getting, where we can actually say a person is not fit for police duties. So we want to encourage survivors and their families to bring these cases forward to their officers in charge of their police station, or even here at Police General Headquarters, so that we review and look at the cases. Once we get these cases, Rejoice, I will be very happy if you can give me details of the Mtoko one, so that we look at it and see what really happened. Mm-hmm. But for the Rutenga one, I've already checked with the Masvingo province. And there are issues to do with evidence there. I'm sure Fadzai was talking about issues related to evidence. Because, you know, sexual offenses, rape, for instance, is a very complicated case. And the level, the evidence that is required, usually it is between those two people. And usually, we really need to have a watertight case for us to take to the courts.
So sometimes they do fall away.
Yes,
because
they do fall away because
absence.
of evidence. For example, in that particular matter, the Rutenga one, the docket was done. Investigations were done from Rutenga to Chitungwiza to Urungwe, where the whole scenario started, and the evidence was presented before the National Prosecuting Authority, and they saw it that this was not a matter. That
so they could not proceed.
They could not
Is
proceed.
there a time frame? Is it ever too late to report a case?
Reporting a case, no. You can report at any time.
It doesn't matter when
it doesn't
happened.
matter. For us as police, we take reports that happened even when you were not born, Rejoice.
Fantastic.
Why do we do that? We understand that the needs of the survivors is not only legal. There could be psychosocial issues that are there. So we then refer, like she was making reference to the multi-sectoral protocol. If a person says, no, I'm failing to have an intimate relationship with my husband because I was abused when I was 3, we will not say, no, don't report.
So you will start from when it's
They will report,
reported.
then we will engage a psychologist, to engage a counselor and refer this particular person so that at least they will be able to move on with their life. But prosecution, that's another issue. Prosecuting a case that way, that one, there is a time limit.
Wow.
That's 20 years. There is a recent judgment that confirmed that particular position, where they are saying if you have reported after 20 years, we cannot prosecute.
And that's a good place to end the conversation today. You may report, and there, as Superintendent Mutema is saying, as far back as 20 years, and a case will still be sought after, and access to justice will probably be given. Thank you very much to Superintendent Mutema and to Fadzai Trakwino of Wilsa for coming through. It's been an amazing conversation, but there's loads of topics that have come out of there, topics that we need to pick up. What's left is for me to thank our sponsors for today. I am Swedish Development Partner. A big thank you for sponsoring today's show. Also, thank you very much to Veronica Mwanza, our very able sign language interpreter from Deaf Zimbabwe Trust. Keep your eyes and ears open. If there's stuff going on out there that we should know, our numbers are on the screen. Get in touch with Issues Pane Nyaya. Ndinonzi Rejoice Nharaunda-Makawa. Till next time, stay safe and goodbye.